Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Picture yourself trapped in a cold, dark prison cell. Solitary confinement. Days melting into one another like a gray, shapeless nightmare. No books, no tools, no human contact. For most of us, this sounds like the worst kind of torture, the kind of place where your mind would slowly unravel. But here's where the story gets interesting. In a Hungarian prison, during one of the country's darkest political periods, a poet named Tolus Tibor and his fellow inmates, intellectuals imprisoned for their ideas, found an unexpected way to survive with their sanity intact. They organized a poetry translation contest. Let that sink in for a moment. These men had nothing, no paper, no pens. So they got creative in ways that seem almost impossible. They spent months whispering messages through walls and cracks, cell to cell, just to agree on which poem they'd all translate. They settled on Walt Whitman's "Oh, Captain, my Captain," because it was one of the few poems most of them remembered. Then the real ingenuity began. Tibor would smear a thin layer of soap across the bottom of his shoe and painstakingly scratch his translation into it with a toothpick. Once he'd memorized each line, he'd wipe the soap clean and start fresh. As different versions took shape, they were memorized and whispered down the prison corridor, cell by cell, until every man had weighed in with his opinion and cast his vote. This improvised game became more than just a distraction. It was their lifeline. It gave them something precious, a clear goal, a framework of rules, and a challenge that demanded every ounce of their concentration. In that hellish place, they'd somehow created their own private universe of meaning and, against all odds, even joy. What these prisoners stumbled upon in their darkest hour is the same secret a surgeon experiences when an operation becomes a symphony of precise movements, the same revelation a rock climber feels when everything else vanishes and only the next grip on the stone matters. It's a particular state of consciousness that caught the attention of the researcher who spent his career studying it, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He gave it a simple name, flow. His book, Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience, is more than just another self-help manual. Think of it as a blueprint for those magical moments when you feel utterly alive, completely absorbed, performing at the peak of your abilities. It became a bestseller and influenced everyone from business leaders to artists. And the reason is straightforward. It tackles the most fundamental question we can ask ourselves. How do we create lasting happiness in a world that often feels chaotic and beyond our control? By the time we finish this journey together, you won't just understand what flow is. You'll have practical keys to unlock it in your own life, whether you're studying for an exam, working on a project, or just going about your everyday routine. This isn't about chasing temporary pleasure. This is about discovering the deep, lasting satisfaction that comes from growth, from meeting challenges head-on, and from fully engaging your mind and body in what you're doing. This is the foundation of a meaningful life. 23 centuries ago, Aristotle reached a straightforward conclusion. Above everything else, human beings are searching for happiness. We pursue money, health, power, and beauty, not because we want these things for themselves, but because we believe they'll make us happy. Yet here we are, all these centuries later, surrounded by comforts and technologies that would have blown the minds of ancient emperors. And the question remains, are we actually any happier? The research suggests we're not really doing much better. Sure, we're healthier and we live longer, but countless people spend their lives cycling between mild anxiety and nagging boredom. So what happened? Are we just wired to always want more than we have? Or have we been hunting for happiness in completely the wrong places? This puzzle drove a young psychologist named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He noticed something intriguing. When he interviewed hundreds of experts, painters, athletes, musicians, chess champions, surgeons, people who devoted themselves to activities they loved, often for little financial reward or recognition, a pattern emerged. When they described the moments they felt at their absolute best, they all describe something remarkably similar. A composer talked about disappearing into his music. A chess champion described the world fading away during an intense match. A rock climber spoke of experiencing this zen-like state of grace on the mountain face. They all described being so completely involved in what they were doing that nothing else mattered. The experience itself was so rewarding that they'd gladly do it again, even if it cost them something, simply for the sake of doing it. Csikszentmihalyi named this state after a word his subjects kept using. They said it felt like being carried along by a current, like floating effortlessly. He called it flow. What he'd discovered was revolutionary. Happiness isn't something that just happens to you. It's not about luck or random chance. You can't buy it, and power can't command it. Happiness, he realized, is something you have to prepare for, nurture and protect deliberately. It's what happens when you learn to take control of your inner experience. But to understand how to find flow, we first need to understand what we're fighting against. Csikszentmihalyi calls this enemy psychic entropy. It's a fascinating concept. Think of entropy as the universe's natural drift toward chaos. The cosmos wasn't designed with our comfort in mind. It's random and completely indifferent to what we need. Our minds, when left without direction, naturally tend toward the same chaos. When you've got nothing to do, where does your mind wander? Does it settle into peaceful contentment? Rarely. Instead, it drifts toward worries, insecurities, frustrations. That project you're putting off. That embarrassing thing you said last week. That vague dread about what's coming next. This is psychic entropy in action. The baseline disorder we're constantly trying to escape. And we've gotten creative with our escape strategies. We flip on the TV, not because we're genuinely interested in what's on, but because the glowing screen gives our wandering attention somewhere to land, offering temporary refuge from the chaos bubbling inside. We chase passive entertainment, scroll endlessly, reach for any distraction that keeps us from turning inward and facing that internal turbulence. These tactics can provide what Csikszentmihalyi calls pleasure, and pleasure definitely has its place. Eating when you're hungry, sleeping when you're exhausted, these restore balance to your body and mind. They bring you back to equilibrium. But pleasure and enjoyment are fundamentally different things. Pleasure is about satisfying a need. It's about returning to baseline. It doesn't lead anywhere new. You can experience pleasure without lifting a finger. Enjoyment, though, is a different animal entirely. Enjoyment happens when you don't just satisfy a need, but push beyond your usual limits. It happens when you accomplish something unexpected, something you might not have imagined you could do. Enjoyment comes with a sense of progress, of discovering something fresh, of achievement. Playing a challenging tennis match that pushes your skills is enjoyable. Reading a book that completely shifts how you see the world is enjoyable. Having a conversation that sparks ideas you didn't know you had is enjoyable. After an enjoyable experience, you're different. You've grown, you've become more complex. And here's the crucial distinction. While pleasure maintains the status quo, enjoyment creates new levels of order in your consciousness. This is what flow is all about. So what does this optimal experience actually feel like? Through thousands of interviews with people from every imaginable background, elderly Korean women, Navajo shepherds, Tokyo teenagers, Chicago factory workers, Csikszentmihalyi found that descriptions of flow are remarkably consistent across cultures. It has 8 defining characteristics. Let's explore these, because understanding them is like getting a master key to unlock a happier existence. The first, and arguably most crucial element, is that flow happens when you're tackling a challenging activity that demands skill. This is the sweet spot between boredom and anxiety. Imagine you're playing tennis. If your opponent is way better than you, you'll feel anxious and overwhelmed. The challenge exceeds your skill level. But if you're playing someone who just picked up a racket yesterday, you'll be bored within minutes. The challenge is too far below your abilities. Flow exists in that narrow channel right between these extremes, where the challenge perfectly matches your current skill level. It needs to stretch you just enough, pushing you to the edge of what you can currently do. This is why flow naturally leads to growth. You can't stay in flow at the same level forever. Once you've mastered getting the ball over the net consistently, it becomes routine. To find flow again, you need to raise the stakes, maybe by working on your serve or playing someone slightly better than you. This constant need to increase the challenge to maintain flow is what drives us to learn, improve, and become more capable. The second element is what he calls the merging of action and awareness. This is that almost mystical feeling of being in the zone. When you're experiencing flow, your focus is so complete that you stop being aware of yourself as separate from what you're doing. You and the activity become one thing. A dancer described it perfectly. Your concentration is total. Your mind isn't wandering. You're completely absorbed in what you're doing. You feel relaxed, comfortable, and energetic. A rock climber put it this way: you're so involved in what you're doing that you aren't thinking of yourself as separate from the activity. The action becomes spontaneous, almost automatic. You're not second-guessing every move or wondering whether you should be doing this differently. You're simply doing it. The activity carries you forward as if by its own momentum. Third and fourth, flow experiences feature clear goals and immediate feedback. This is why games naturally produce flow. In tennis, you always know exactly what you're trying to do. Get the ball over the net and inside the lines. And with every single shot, you get instant feedback. It was in or out, it was good, or it needed work. This continuous stream of information tells you precisely how you're doing and lets you adjust your approach moment by moment. This principle extends far beyond games. A surgeon knows the goal is to repair the damaged tissue. The feedback is constant. As long as there's no unexpected bleeding, things are progressing well. Even a gardener gets feedback watching her plants respond to care day by day. When you have crystal clear goals and instant feedback, your mind doesn't waste energy wondering what to do next or how you're performing. The activity itself provides the structure, which allows your consciousness to become completely focused and ordered. This naturally leads to the fifth element: deep, intense concentration on what you're doing. When you're in flow, you're so laser-focused that all the unpleasant stuff in life just disappears. There's simply no mental space left for anything else. A basketball player nailed it. You can worry about something all day, but the second you step on the court, forget it. When you're playing basketball, that's the only thing in your mind. Nothing but basketball. This is one of flow's greatest gifts. It offers a temporary vacation from psychic entropy. For a while, all the worries and frustrations of daily life are put on hold. You're not avoiding them or running away. Your attention is just so fully engaged with the challenge in front of you that they can't intrude. The sixth element is what Csikszentmihalyi calls the paradox of control. People in flow consistently describe feeling a powerful sense of control. But here's the twist. This feeling often shows up in situations that are actually quite risky or uncertain. A rock climber on a sheer cliff, a sailor in rough weather, a surgeon performing delicate work. These aren't exactly safe situations. So what's this sense of control really about? It's not about having a guaranteed positive outcome. It's about knowing your skills are honed enough that you're capable of handling whatever comes your way. Rock climbers, for instance, distinguish between objective dangers, things like sudden rockfall or storms which are unpredictable, and subjective dangers which come from lack of skill. The whole point of climbing is to minimize objective dangers and completely eliminate subjective ones through training and preparation. So the satisfaction comes not from courting danger, but from the ability to bring order to a potentially chaotic situation. You only feel genuine control when the outcome is uncertain, and you're able to influence it through your abilities. The seventh element is the loss of self-consciousness. When you're deeply absorbed in an activity, that critical inner voice that's constantly judging, worrying, and questioning, it goes quiet. You stop thinking about how you look, what others might think of you, or whether you're measuring up. The ego takes a break. Here we find another beautiful paradox. By losing yourself, you actually become stronger. While you're in flow, you're not thinking about what this experience means for yourself. But afterward, when self-awareness returns, the self you're reflecting on isn't the same one from before. It's now richer, enhanced by new skills and fresh achievements. You look back, almost in disbelief at what you were able to do. You've pushed your boundaries, and in doing so, you've expanded your own understanding of who you are and what you're capable of. Sometimes you have to let go of the self temporarily to build a stronger one. Finally, the eighth element is the transformation of time. This is something nearly everyone who's experienced flow talks about. Time gets weird. Usually, hours fly by like minutes. You start working on something, get completely absorbed, and when you finally look up, you realize half the day has vanished. Sometimes the opposite happens. A ballet dancer might describe a difficult turn that takes less than a second in reality, but feels like it stretches out luxuriously, giving her all the time she needs to make tiny adjustments. Either way, when you're in flow, you're not living by the clock anymore. You're living in a rhythm set by the activity itself. When all these elements come together, the result is what Csikszentmihalyi calls an autotelic experience. The word comes from Greek, auto, meaning self, and telos, meaning goal. An autotelic activity is its own reward. You do it not for some future payoff, not for money or recognition, but simply because the doing itself is the reward. This is intrinsic motivation in its purest form. And when you find this, life stops being about waiting for some hypothetical future happiness. The present moment becomes valuable in and of itself. So how do we find more of this in our daily lives? Csikszentmihalyi shows us that flow is available everywhere if we know how to look for it. Let's start with the most obvious tool we have, our bodies. The human body is an incredible source of potential enjoyment, yet so many of us barely scratch the surface of what it can do. We can learn to find flow through physical activities, what the book calls the body in flow. Take something as simple as walking. For most people, it's just transportation, a way to get from point A to point B. But you can transform it into a flow activity. Set yourself goals. Walk a certain distance. Discover a new route. Maintain a particular pace. Introduce challenges. Walk on a trail where every step requires careful attention to balance and footing. Focus your attention on your breathing rhythm, on the sounds of the city, on how the light plays across the buildings. By adding goals and developing skills, even the most ordinary physical act can become deeply satisfying. The same principle applies to everything your body can do. In sports, the goal is obvious: go higher, faster, stronger. In dance, it's about expressing yourself through graceful movement, feeling your body harmonize with the music. Even sex, which provides basic pleasure for almost everyone, can evolve into a deeply complex and enjoyable flow activity. When you move beyond the purely physical and add the dimensions of romance, the courtship, the emotional sharing, it becomes richer. And when you add genuine care for your partner, the challenge of truly understanding them, helping them grow, discovering new things together, sexuality becomes something that can provide flow experiences throughout a lifetime. To keep love alive, the relationship needs to keep growing more complex. But beyond the physical, some of the deepest flow experiences happen entirely within the mind. This is the flow of thought. The mind's natural state, as we've seen, tends toward chaos. But we can create order through mental practices. One of the most ancient is cultivating memory. Before writing existed, memory was humanity's hard drive. It held the songs, laws, and histories of entire cultures. Remembering is enjoyable because it fulfills a goal and brings order to consciousness. Someone whose memory is well stocked with information, poems, stories, historical facts, scientific principles, is never truly bored. They carry a self-contained world inside their head and can create meaning wherever they are. From memory, we move to playing with language. Conversation, when done thoughtfully, isn't just information exchange. It's an art form. One ancient caliph called it the Garden of Eden. And writing, whether journaling or composing poetry, is a powerful way to create order from the randomness of experience. When you write, you're not just recording thoughts, you're creating them. Then there are the great symbolic systems culture has given us: history, science, and philosophy. Too often these feel like boring school subjects. But approached with genuine curiosity, they become incredible mental playgrounds. An amateur historian doesn't just memorize dates. She builds a personal museum of the past, connecting her own life to humanity's grand story. An amateur scientist isn't chasing a Nobel Prize. She's driven by curiosity, by the pure delight of observing the world, spotting patterns, solving puzzles. Some of history's greatest scientific breakthroughs came from amateurs, people who were simply having fun playing with ideas. And an amateur philosopher, literally a lover of wisdom, can use the big questions about existence to bring profound order to their own thinking. The key in every case is to become an amateur or dilettante in the original beautiful sense, someone who does things for the love of it, for the sheer delight it brings. Now let's tackle one of the most important areas of life: work. So many people see work as a necessary evil, something to endure until they can get to their real life, their free time. But Csikszentmihalyi's research reveals something startling. People report experiencing flow far more often at work than during their leisure time. At work, we often have clear goals, immediate feedback, and challenges that match our skills. We feel strong, active, engaged. In our free time, by contrast, we often feel apathetic. With no structure, we drift. Our skills sit unused, and we feel passive, bored, and dissatisfied. Here's the paradox. We're often in flow at work, but we wish we were somewhere else. In our free time, we're often apathetic, yet we wish we had more of it. Why? Because we're trapped by the cultural story that work is supposed to be unpleasant and leisure is supposed to be fun. We ignore what our actual experience is telling us. But it doesn't have to be this way. The secret is reframing how we think about work. Csikszentmihalyi shares remarkable stories of people who found deep satisfaction in the most unlikely jobs. There's Serafina, a 76-year-old woman living in the Alps. Her days are filled with demanding labor, milking cows, cleaning the house, cutting hay. But when asked what she enjoys most in life, she names those very tasks. Everything in nature keeps you company, she says. You feel clean and happy. For her, there's no line between work and play. Her life is one seamless whole. Then there's Joe, a welder in a South Chicago railroad plant. Hot, noisy, dangerous work. Yet Joe was known as the happiest and most essential person in the factory. Why? Because he'd transformed his job into a game. He'd mastered every piece of machinery, not because he had to, but because he was fascinated by how things worked. He turned every broken machine into a puzzle to solve. His work was a constant source of flow. At home, he applied the same mindset, building an elaborate rock garden with handmade sprinklers that created rainbows. Joe and Serafina have what Csikszentmihalyi calls an autotelic personality, the ability to create flow experiences even in harsh environments. They prove that the quality of your experience depends more on how you approach something than on the actual circumstances. This brings us to perhaps the most powerful part of the book. What happens when things go terribly wrong? When tragedy strikes, can we find flow even in suffering? Csikszentmihalyi studied people who'd faced devastating circumstances. He interviewed paraplegics who'd lost the use of their limbs in accidents. Incredibly, many described the accident that paralyzed them as both one of the most negative and one of the most positive events of their lives. How is that possible? Because the tragedy gave them a new, crystal-clear purpose. It stripped away all the trivial, inessential choices of daily life and presented them with one urgent goal: to learn to live again. Every small victory, learning to dress themselves, mastering a wheelchair, became a source of enormous pride and satisfaction. The accident, a source of profound chaos, became the catalyst for creating powerful new inner order. He found the same pattern among people who'd lost their sight. One woman said that blindness freed her from a painful family situation and made her life more purposeful than it would have been otherwise. She found flow in her work as a telephone operator. feeling almost godlike as she smoothly connected the web of human conversations. These individuals are masters of consciousness. They have what psychologists call transformational coping skills. They take misfortune and transform it into a challenge. They refuse to be destroyed by chaos. Instead, they use its energy to build a stronger, more complex self. They possess what Csikszentmihalyi calls an autotelic self, a self that has goals that come from within. It's not pushed around by biological urges or social pressures. Its goals emerge from a conscious evaluation of its own experience. An autotelic self knows how to set meaningful goals, become immersed in activities, pay attention to feedback, and find joy in the immediate experience of living, regardless of external conditions. This brings us to the final, most profound step, the making of meaning. It's one thing to experience flow in separate activities, at work, in hobbies, with friends, but it's something else entirely to turn your whole life into a unified flow experience. This happens when you discover an overarching purpose, a goal so challenging and compelling that it gives significance to everything else you do. It could be the pursuit of knowledge, creating art, fighting for justice, raising a family, or seeking spiritual truth. The specific goal doesn't matter, as long as it's meaningful enough to organize a lifetime's worth of energy. When you have such a life theme, all your separate actions fit together. Everything you do makes sense within that larger framework. Csikszentmihalyi calls this the unification of meaning. It has three parts. First is purpose, knowing what your ultimate goal is. Second is resolution, the determination to pursue that goal, to translate intention into action, even when obstacles appear. And third is harmony, the inner peace that comes when your actions, thoughts, and feelings are all aligned with your purpose. Someone who achieves this has truly mastered their consciousness. They don't fear the future, or even death, because every moment makes sense. Every moment is part of a unified flow experience. Life, in itself, has no built-in meaning, but that doesn't mean we have to accept it passively. The fact that we weren't born with wings didn't stop us from learning to fly. Similarly, the fact that life has no inherent meaning doesn't stop us from creating meaning. This is the ultimate challenge for a conscious being, to find your purpose, forge your determination, and create a life of harmony and meaning from the raw materials of existence. This is the path to optimal experience. This is the path of flow. When you look at the world today, the message of flow feels more relevant than ever. We're living in an age of constant distraction. Our attention has become the most valuable commodity there is, and everyone, social media companies, advertisers, news outlets, is competing for a piece of it. The result? Many of us feel like we're in a permanent state of low-grade psychic entropy. Our minds are scattered, our focus fragmented, and we're always reaching for the next easy distraction to keep the discomfort of mental chaos at bay. We scroll mindlessly, binge-watch shows, and wonder why we feel so drained and unfulfilled at the end of the day. What Csikszentmihalyi's work brilliantly reminds us is that the most rewarding experiences aren't the easy ones. They're not the ones that happen to us passively. They're the ones we actively create. They're the ones that demand our full attention, our skills, and our effort. The book makes a compelling case against treating life as something to consume passively. It's a call to become an active creator of your own experience. It tells us that satisfaction isn't found in effortless relaxation, but in the heat of a challenge, in the moment when your abilities are stretched to their limits in pursuit of something difficult and worthwhile. This idea is deeply empowering. It means you don't have to wait for perfect circumstances to start living better. You don't need more money, a better job, or a different situation. The power to transform your experience exists within your own consciousness, right here, right now. So how can you start applying this today? Here are a few practical ideas to begin your flow practice. First, pick one routine, mundane activity you do every day. Washing dishes, folding laundry, commuting to work or school. Tonight, when you do it, treat it like a game. Set a small, specific goal. Maybe it's washing the dishes more efficiently than ever before, or folding the laundry with the precision of a craftsman. or noticing 3 beautiful things on your commute you've never noticed before. Give that simple task your complete, undivided attention. See if you can find a little pocket of order and satisfaction, where there was once only tedium. Second, the next time you have a conversation with someone, a friend, a family member, practice deep listening. For those few minutes, make them the most important thing in your world. Don't think about what you'll say next. Don't glance at your phone. Just focus on understanding them. Make it your goal to see the world through their eyes. Relationships are one of the richest sources of flow, but only when we invest our full attention in them. Finally, try to find just 10 minutes today to be completely alone, without any distractions. No phone, no music, no TV. Just you and your thoughts. Don't force your mind to be quiet. Just observe it. See where it goes when nothing's pulling at it. This might feel uncomfortable at first. That's psychic entropy trying to take over. But learning to be comfortable in solitude is the first step toward learning to direct your own consciousness. That was a summary of Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. We've covered the major landmarks of this remarkable book today, but I'll be honest, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you take the journey yourself. The true magic of a book like this happens in those quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or simple phrase connects with your own life in an unexpected way. This summary is meant to give you a glimpse of the territory and help you decide if it's a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about today has sparked something in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning, it's an experience that can genuinely shift how you see yourself and the world around you. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring ideas from some of the most transformative books ever written, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It lets me know this work matters to you and ensures you won't miss our next journey into another masterpiece from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing and keep flowing together.